It was 3 a.m. in a quiet Canadian coffee shop, the kind of quiet where you can hear every creak and sigh of the building. I worked the graveyard shift, which more often than not meant solitude. Just me, a sea of empty tables, and the steady hum of fluorescent lights. The only other soul around was the old baker in the back, a grizzled man whose Navy days provided an endless supply of dirty jokes and bawdy songs. He rarely ventured out of the kitchen unless absolutely necessary, and I expected nothing different that night. I was boxing up the day-old pastries for the local homeless shelter, a nightly ritual I could almost do with my eyes closed. As I worked, I caught something in my peripheral vision, movement, quick and subtle, just behind me. A chill ran up my spine. I turned around, looked down, and froze. Standing there, staring up at me with wide, unblinking eyes, was a small child, a toddler, no older than 2 or 3, with a little faux hawk and a round, serious face. He was indigenous, his dark eyes glinting under the harsh lights of the shop. For a moment, I couldn't move. How absurd was this? How did a toddler get behind the counter? I scanned the empty storefront. The glass door hadn't opened. The bell above it never chimed. I didn't hear a single sound that would have warned me of someone coming in. And yet, here he was. Hey there, buddy," I managed to say, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't respond, just kept staring, his tiny fists balled at his sides. I yelled for the baker, my voice echoing through the silent shop. When he emerged, wiping flour off his hands, he stopped dead in his tracks, eyes locked on the kid. "Where the hell did he come from?" he muttered, his voice as baffled as mine. The toddler mumbled something, words I couldn't make out. His lips moved, but the sounds were garbled, like he was speaking through a fog. I knelt down, trying to talk to him, but he didn't respond to my questions. Instead, he just looked at me with this intensity, like he was trying to tell me something without the words to say it. I grabbed a glass of water and a donut hole, hoping it might calm him down. He nibbled on the treat, still muttering under his breath, his gaze darting around like he was searching for something, or someone. The baker ran out of the shop to do a quick search of the area, thinking maybe the kid's parents were nearby. Meanwhile, I called the non-emergency line, explaining in a shaky voice that I had a toddler here, alone, with no adults in sight. I could barely believe my own words. The police arrived not long after, their flashing lights painting the empty street outside. They tried to talk to the boy, but like us, they got nothing but incoherent mumbling and vague gestures. One officer knelt in front of him, speaking softly, but the kid just stared blankly, his little hands clutching the water cup. The baker came back, shaking his head. "Nobody out there. Corner store guy says he hasn't seen anyone either." The police eventually took the boy, promising to figure out where he belonged. I watched them drive away, the toddler bundled up in the back seat, his tiny face still hauntingly expressionless. Later that morning, the officers returned for their usual coffee, and one of them filled me in. "You won't believe this," he said, shaking his head. "The kid walked here, several kilometers, in the dead of night." "What?" I asked, my voice rising in disbelief. "Yeah," he continued. "He's from the nearest reservation, got into his parents' medicine cabinet and wandered out of the house. Just walked, all the way to your shop." I felt a knot tighten in my chest. Several kilometers. In the cold, in the dark, all alone. That little boy had somehow made his way across streets, fields, who knows what else, and ended up at my counter. I couldn't stop picturing him standing there, silent and eerie, like he'd materialized out of thin air. Even now, thinking about it sends a shiver down my spine. I've had my share of crazy experiences working the graveyard shift. A guy threw a pot of coffee at me once, a woman tried to stab me with a plastic spoon over a metal one, and there was that one lunatic who waited 4 hours just to teach me a lesson, because we didn't have his favorite bagel. But none of that shook me like this did. That little boy with his faux hawk and his mumbled words, appearing out of nowhere at 3 a.m., that image will haunt me for a long, long time. Working in an emergency room means you see things most people can't even imagine. But out of all the chaotic, gut-wrenching, and sometimes downright horrifying nights, one stands out. A night I'll never forget. It started with a call about a patient bitten by a baby timber rattlesnake. We braced ourselves, but nothing could have prepared us for what came through those doors. When the patient arrived, it was like a scene out of a horror movie. He was bleeding from every single orifice: eyes, ears, nose, mouth, you name it. I've seen a lot of blood in this job, but this was something else. More blood than even the aftermath of a high-speed motorcycle crash into asphalt. It was everywhere. We immediately went to work, administering Crofab antivenom as fast as we could, trying to stabilize him and stop the internal destruction caused by the venom. I don't even remember how many doses we gave. It was the hospital's entire supply. At the same time, we were frantically coordinating a helicopter transport to a larger facility, one better equipped to handle this kind of trauma. The tension in the room was suffocating, but we powered through, doing everything in our capacity to keep him alive. But the blood, the venom, the chaos, none of that was the worst part. The worst part came when the venom caused him to lose control of his bowels. The smell, I can't even put it into words. It wasn't just bad, it was soul-shakingly horrific. A smell that clung to everything and made your stomach churn like it was trying to escape your body. I stood by the door, desperately trying to stay functional, armed with a battery-powered fan and gauze pads drenched in cinnamon oil. The cinnamon oil was my lifeline, my only defense against the unrelenting stench. Even the doctor, who was right in the thick of it, would poke her head out every so often just so I could waft some cinnamon oil in her direction. It was surreal, a battlefield of blood, venom, and unimaginable odors. Against all odds, the patient survived. By the time we got him onto the helicopter, he was barely hanging on, but he made it. Somehow, some way, he made a full recovery. It was nothing short of a miracle. Still, the memory of that night haunts me. The blood, the smell, the sheer intensity of it all, and the terrifying reality that a baby timber rattlesnake, something so small, could cause that much destruction. I'll never look at them the same way again.